Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. My name is Megan and I'm the witch here around the cauldron where we talk about witchcraft, polytheism, and the intersection of magic and mundane. Today's video is going to be a book review. I am going to be reviewing Rebel Witch by Kelly-Ann Maddox. I did buy this book with my own money. I know sometimes I have done reviews where I have gotten the book for free, but this one I purchased with my own money. We read it for my Patreon book club, which Patreon is no more. I will make an announcement about that shortly, eventually. I'm moving to my own members site type thing. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. Today I am reviewing Rebel Witch by Kelly-Ann Maddox. Now, the way that I like to do my book reviews is I like to break them into chunks. I have the sort of introduction, which is what I'm doing right now. Then I go into what I didn't like about the book. I go into what I did like about the book. And then the last little section is sort of overall thoughts, who I think the book is for, and whether or not I would recommend it. So let's get into it. So Rebel Witch was written by Kelly-Ann Maddox, and if you aren't really part of the occult YouTube sphere, you might not know who she is. But Kelly-Ann is an occult YouTuber, an occult woman here on YouTube who has been making videos and creating amazing things on her own website for a few years. I don't have an exact number, but she's been around for a while, certainly longer than I have myself. So her book is called Rebel Witch, Carve the Craft That's Yours Alone. And can we just take a second to appreciate the cover of this book? It's beautiful. But I want to read you the book blurb on the back before we start talking about things that I didn't like about the book. So it says, "This is an invitation to become a witch on your own terms. Rebel Witch does not seek to tell you what to do. Its aim is to spark inspiration and encourage you to create a truly authentic practice that reflects your unique experiences, tastes, and personality. It's about trying things out, swerving the stuff that feels dusty and boring, and choosing only what makes your heart dance the witchy fandango." There is much more to it, but that's just about the small little blurb of what Rebel Witch is about. So out of this entire book, it's split into 3 sections. It is section 1, or part 1 says, "Let's begin." Part 2 says, "Make it happen." And part 3 says, "Let's keep growing." And I really enjoyed how this was split into parts, but we'll get to that in a second. First, there are 2 things that I want to talk about really quickly or briefly that I didn't really like. And the first one is something that I think everybody should be on board with, and that is consent when it comes to sex magic. So let me find the section in here really quick. And I'll admit there were only 2 things out of this book that really didn't appeal to me, and that's saying something. So this first part is on page 161, and it's about sex magic. And normally most things that I have come across in terms of sex magic have been okay. You know, it's been informative, or it has hit my own personal ethical pinpoints, I guess. But there is one little part in the paragraph on sex magic that I didn't really like. It says, "Many witches have used the orgasmic state to direct intention toward their aims, whether that state is achieved alone or with a partner." Cool, right? It says you can focus on your intention or a symbol of it, such as a sigil, during the sexual act. A partner doesn't need to know what you're doing, but it may be advisable to let them know what's up if they're likely to find a change in your behavior disconcerting. So that for me crosses a boundary of consent, because when you are engaging in sex magic, you are normally intermingling, or let me back up. When you're engaging in sex magic with a partner, you are normally intermingling your own energy with their energy and, creating that buildup and working together energetically to a specific purpose, a specific will or intention. For me personally, I could not engage in sex magic with a partner and not tell them what I'm doing, because that crosses an ethical boundary for me of consent. They didn't consent to having their energy used. They didn't consent to being used for you to raise energy magically, not necessarily just sexually. So that is one thing that I didn't really like about that section. But that's my own moral compass, I guess you could say. The next thing that is just sort of a personal thing of mine, a personal, what do I even want to call it? Preference, a personal preference, is that, let me find it. I know I should have had these marked ahead of time. I know what I'm looking for. So another thing for me that is sort of a personal preference that I didn't really like was the explanation of the Sabbats. And it's at the beginning of part 2 where Kelly is talking about, or Kelly-Ann, is talking about witchy calendars. And it says, your witchy calendar. When it comes to the Wheel of the Year, I see this a lot. The 4 Celtic fire festivals of Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain are generally sort of watered down, and the cultural significance is removed from the explanation of those particular holidays. So, for example, culturally, Imbolc has a lot of significance for a few different Celtic nations. I can't even say Celtic culture, because that is not correct. There is not one singular Celtic culture. But Imbolc has cultural significance, and Bridget is celebrated and honored, and there's a lot of purification and protection and cleansing that happens on Imbolc, and a lot of protection against the good neighbors, in Ireland speaking specifically, I believe. Or am I getting it mixed up with Bealtaine? I think I'm getting the two confused. But there is cultural significance when it comes to these particular holidays. And when they're explained in books, you get the watered down version, and you don't get the significance of the particular holidays from the cultures that they come from. So for example, Imbolc says it's a celebration of the coming of the light out of darkness and impending spring, celebrated the 1st of February to the 2nd of February. Beltane says a fiery celebration of summer's energies. Lunasa says a celebration of the beginning of harvest time. Lunasa has a lot of cultural significance too, because it is the funeral games of Lu, and it's a celebration and time to honor Taltu, Lu's foster mother. And there's a lot to it, but all the explanations that I ever see in books that are geared more towards neo-paganism or neo-Wicca don't really explain that. And it's just a personal preference of mine to not remove the cultural significance of these particular holidays, even if you're explaining them in a neo-pagan sort of way. So those are the only 2 things that I really didn't enjoy out of the book. With a book this size, that is saying something for me. The rest of it is fairly good. I enjoyed it. There were parts that were, for me, sort of a repeat, I guess. There were parts that I skimmed that I didn't read entirely, because you can only read so many beginner books and only read the same thing so many times. And that's not a knock on Kelly-Ann. This book is very much geared towards beginners, very much geared towards people who want to start out on a witchcraft path that aren't necessarily looking for a book on neo-Wicca, though a lot of what is in beginner books is inspired by Wicca. So for the things that I really enjoyed about this book, the first thing that comes to my mind is that Kelly-Ann kept her voice in this book. I mean, where is it here? Is it on this one? It's not on the back. But Kelly-Ann kept her voice in this book, and I absolutely love that. If you've never watched any of Kelly-Ann's videos, the writing style of this book might be a little disconcerting. Kelly-Ann is a fan of pet names like Pop-Tart and cupcake and things like that. And I think it's adorable. And that type of writing is kept in her book. And I absolutely love that she was able to keep her voice in her writing style. It makes the book more personal and approachable, in my opinion. I also enjoy that the book was split up into 3 different parts that make it very, what's the word I'm looking for? Logical. Let's Begin, Make It Happen, and Let's Keep Growing. So Let's Begin covers exactly what Kelly-Ann means by rebel witch. She covers why someone might want to start practicing witchcraft. She also covers coming out of the broom closet, making witchcraft your own, and something that I really appreciated was questioning the consensus. It encourages the reader to develop their own set of critical thinking skills and their own sort of filter when it comes to the information that they see online or in books or that people might be telling them. Sort of like questioning why things are done a certain way and what makes that way the quote-unquote right way for that person, and deciding for yourself if it's going to be the right way for you. The Make It Happen section is fantastic. It talks about your witchy calendar, divine and other non-physical beings, cleansing, altars, spells, rituals, keeping records, all kinds of great information for anyone that is new to a witchcraft practice or anyone that might need a refresher, or even for someone who is just looking for some different ideas. And then the last one, Let's Keep Growing, talks about scheduling, ethics, shadow work, seeking help and troubleshooting and connecting with others. So that's sort of like the tail end of developing a practice. One of the chapters that I really appreciated was the witchy calendar section. And I liked this chapter so much because it's something that I'm actively doing. So it was really nice to see my own sort of process validated in a book. Because if you haven't listened to my most recent podcast episode about throwing out your wheel of the year, I will leave a link to that in the description. But a lot of what Kelly-Ann talks about in the section on making your own witchy calendar are things that I'm actively doing. And there's even more information in this book than I had previously known. So I got even more ideas of things that I can do, which of course I can celebrate whatever I want because, it's my own calendar. But, things that I maybe have never thought of. And I just really appreciated that someone talked about that, especially when it comes to things like the Wheel of the Year, where those particular Sabbats don't really vibe with a lot of people, especially if you don't have a European-based practice. The last couple of things that I want to talk about real quick that I enjoyed about this book are the fact that at the end of each chapter, there are 2 different sort of boxes. One says try it and one says write it. And these have different exercises and questions that you can do. So the exercises might be very simple, like create a meditation practice for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't know if that's actually one of them. Let's see if I can get an example really quick before I start throwing things out there that aren't actually in the book. And it's not even just at the end of each chapter. So like in the section on cleansing, it's chapter 10, spiritual hygiene, cleansing, energy, and creating sacred space. There are several different try it and write it sections. So for example, write it says, what does it mean to have an energy? What about shifting your energy, holding your energy? What do these terms mean to you? Try using specific examples from your life in your explanation if possible. And then the try it section says, notice the way in which you read or perceive the energy of the next 3 people you encounter. And there are several for each section. So like write it has 4 and try it has 3. And these are scattered throughout the book. And I think it is so great to have different exercises and writing prompts like that in a book, especially one like this that's geared towards beginners. And then lastly, this is a book for beginners. This is a book that is, it might not benefit someone that's been practicing witchcraft for 10, 20 years. You might not learn anything new from it. But Everything that's presented here is presented in like bite-sized pieces. So the section on spirit guides is maybe 2 paragraphs. It's got a section on ancient deities, imaginary friends, animal allies. And that is a good thing, in my opinion, because the reader is given these bite-sized pieces to then further explore on their own and do more research, because let's face it, research is half the battle when it comes to building a witchcraft practice. Research and experience. And everything that is presented in this book in terms of teaching material is presented in a way to give the reader a foundation to jump off and further branch out in their research. And I really appreciated that and the way that it was done. So overall, I would definitely recommend Rebel Witch to anyone who is looking to start a witchcraft practice, or maybe someone who wants to go back to basics and get some new ideas. I like the way the information is presented in Rebel Witch, and I believe everybody else who approaches it will as well. I think it might be important to at least watch one of Kelly-Ann's videos to get an idea, get a feel for how she speaks, because if not, some of the writing styles might throw you off. But overall, yes, I would give, out of 5 stars, I think I would give Rebel Witch a 4 out of 5. And I don't give it a 5 because of those 2 things that I mentioned. The first thing definitely was an ethical point for me, and the second thing is just a personal preference that I want to see more people bring into their writing, not just sort of the rehashing of neo-Wicca or neo-pagan blurbs about the Sabbats, but especially when approaching things like the Celtic fire festivals that have so much history behind them. I think that history is important. And at least in a beginner book like Rebel Witch, maybe just give a little couple of sentences saying that it's inspired by ancient festivals that are still practiced culturally today, just in a different way. So you can find Rebel Witch. Of course, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Bookshop. I'm sure you can also find it on places like Thrift Books, or I don't know, some other sites where people sell their copies of books. I'm not sure if it's on Scribd. It might be on Scribd, I don't know. I will leave links for everywhere that you can find it in the description below. And I hope you enjoyed this review. Definitely check out Kelly-Ann's videos, her website, and her books and all of that stuff. Or her book. As far as I know, she's only written this one book. But yes, and until next time, I will see you later. Bye.